Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and dear colleagues, good evening and heartfelt welcome to our scientific lecture on Quranic translation in the era of artificial intelligence. We truly, we are truly honored to have you all with us today. I'm Hmad Benaissa, your moderator for this enlightening session. Today we come together to explore the fascinating intersection of technology and spirituality. We will examine the challenges and opportunities that artificial intelligence presents in the realm of Quranic translation. We are privileged to have with us our distinguished guest speaker, Professor Ismail Dahia from the École supérieure de l'éducation et de la formation. WIJDA. His expertise and insights will absolutely enhance our understanding of the important subject. Before we begin, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Marwan Sakran, the president of our academy, along with the vice president, Dr. Safiya Kassas, and the executive director, Mr. Yassin Jamal Idrisi, for their invaluable support in organizing this event. I also extend my appreciation to Dr. Abdelkader Ntouati, the director of the Linguistic Research and Language Planning team, and all esteemed members of our academy. A warm welcome also goes to the researchers and attendees joining us via scientific platforms and YouTube. We are delighted to have you here and remind you that the attendance certificates will be provided to all participants. Additionally, we extend our greetings to all members of Great Lisaniyat Academy. We encourage you to participate actively in this series by sharing your own scientific research and results. Throughout this session, please feel free to engage in the discussion by posting your questions and comments in the live chat. We will share the attendance confirmation link during the event. Finally, we kindly ask our valuable followers to support the Academy's efforts by subscribing to our channel and clicking the like button to stay update on upcoming events and activities. Let us get on this insightful journey together. First, it is my great pleasure to introduce our esteemed guest speaker, Professor Ismail Dahia, who is an assistant professor at École supérieure de l'éducation et de la formation in WIJDA. He is a NIFL teacher, high school teacher, who having earned his BA in linguistics from Muhammad I University in WIJDA also. He furthered his education with a master's degree from Ibn Tufayl University in Kenitra, and currently he is a third year doctoral candidate at Applied Communication in Context Laboratory at Muhammad I University. His research interests encompasses English language teaching, translation, and digital literacy in education, making him extremely well suited to discuss the critical topic of Quranic translation in the era of artificial intelligence. We are truly fortunate to have him with us today. Please join me in welcoming Professor Ismail Dahia. Professor, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for your kind words. So before getting started, I'd like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the Linguistics Research and Language Planning team at Beit Lisaniyat International Academy members. And I'd also like to thank especially Mr. Hmad Benaissa for his continuous effort for making this event a success. So as you can see on the slide, my lecture is going to be centered on the relationship between Quranic translation and artificial intelligence. And one of the reasons why I have chosen this topic, why I have taken it upon myself to, focus on Quranic translation specifically, is that, as Mr. Benaissa said, that my research or my doctoral research actually focuses on Quranic translation. And so I actually aim at exploring how different translators have approached the translation of the Holy Quran and the different linguistic, including, the semantic, pragmatic, stylistic, rhetorical aspects of the Quranic, of the Quran in general, okay? As well as, some of the cultural references that, some might pose some, very significant challenges to translators. And of course, how these different translators have gone about, addressing these challenges. And for the second part, which has to do with the use or the integration of artificial intelligence as a machine-based learning tool in, aiding in translation. And what I am going to do actually is just share with you some of my, insightful findings that I have, that are included actually in one of my research articles about, the use of machine learning-based tools like ChatGPT, Claude, and Perplexity AI, and their role in translating, and specifically within the context of Quranic translation. So how we can actually use these machine-based tools in translating the Quran. And the first question that I think is worth answering is, why Quranic translation? And so the translation of the Quran represents a crucial bridge between the divine text and the global Muslim community, with approximately 2 billion Muslims worldwide. After, of course, the Christianity, which represents about 2.3 billion Muslims, Christians worldwide. And so Islam stands as the second largest religion in the world. And what is interesting about these statistics is that around 20% of Muslims are, Arabic-speaking Muslims, while the 80%, which represents about 1.6 billion Muslims worldwide, do not speak Arabic, do not understand Arabic, and therefore they cannot even read the Quran in its original language. And why this is necessary, why this is worth mentioning, of course, it has to do with the fact that some scholars actually oppose the translatability of the Quran. And so there are many scholars who believe that the Quran should not be translated in the first place. So normally, despite the large number of non-Arabic speaking population in the world, there are still, as I said, some scholars who believe that this does not mean that we should actually translate the Quran. And one of the reasons, of course, they give is that if we translate the Quran, we are going to deviate from its original message. And so everything we are going to do to the translation of the Quran is going to be, forgery of the original message of the Quran. Therefore, the Quran should not be translatable. And of course, when opposing views. So the answer with the fact that even if we try to translate the Quran, we are going to fail. And there are some scholars, among which is Hussein Abdul-Rauf and Bassam, who say, for instance, that the Quran is inimitable. And no matter how hard a translator tries, no matter how competent a translator is, they will never be able to replicate the language of the Holy Quran. And so they believe that the language of the Quran is stylistically, linguistically, and I'd say rhetorically distinctive from any other language on the planet. Therefore, what we are going to do is just the meaning within the Quran to non-Muslims and also non-Muslims. And as you can see on the slide, we have some of the features that these scholars believe to be untranslatable. So even if we try to translate them, there will always be some voids, either semantic voids, syntactic voids, or cultural voids that can't actually be bridged or, I would say, filled. And so, as I said, what they do is that they generally just try to at least bridge this gap or minimize the gap between these two languages. And here, when I talk about the two languages, the source language and the target language, I mean the Arabic language and the English language. And the reason why I chose, of course, I chose English language is that it is the most used language in translation of the Quran. And so the Quran was translated actually into Italian, into Indonesian, into Spanish, but you would see that there are hundreds of translations that are found in English alone. And so the English translation represents about, I can say, 20% of all translations that exist out there. And so it's fair to say that it is, worth, studying the English translations specifically. Some of the features, as you can see, is semantic and translatability. And examples include, for instance, polysemy. And polysemy, of course, has to do with the fact that there are some or certain words in the Quran with multiple meanings. And the meaning, say, word differs depending on its, say, location in a specific verse. And you see that there are some translators who actually mistranslate these words, either because they lack the knowledge that this is actually a polysemous word, or that maybe that word does not actually has its equivalence in the English language. There's also the instance of God's names. And even though it might seem, say, self-evident that they can actually be translated, when I say, for instance, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, Al-Jabbar, As-Samad, etc., we see that there are hundreds of translators that still differ regarding whether to translate these names, I say, literally or transliterally. And you see that there are some sort of translators, for example, instead of translating the word Ar-Rahman or Rahim, they just write Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim and then try to explain between brackets what they mean by Ar-Rahman and what they mean by Ar-Rahim. Because for them, these words cannot actually be translatable. They are untranslatable, inimitable, and therefore they should be kept as they are. They should be transliterated instead of translated. Another aspect, as you can see, is syntactic and translatability. One of the examples would be the pull-up tone. We have also double stress. What is interesting, for instance, about double stress is that you see that there are certain syntactic aspects in the Arabic language that are not even allowed in the English language. If we take the double stress, I have an example of a verse. إن الساعة آتية أكاد أخفيها, and then we have إن الساعة لآتية أكاد أخفيها. So in English, in Arabic specifically, we can use stress by using the particle inna or the particle la. Sometimes we use both of them to emphasize certain ideas within the Quran. And in English, this is not allowed. And so in English, we don't have this phenomenon of using double stress. And what translators do is that they tend to sacrifice the meaning or, say, the structure of the Arabic language at the expense of the English one. And instead of using double stress, they only use one stress. So they use inna, and it is mostly translated as indeed instead of saying, for instance, inna la. So they cannot use, for instance, indeed and indeed, which is not something that would sound unnatural in the English language. And so, as I said, they sacrifice the structure, and they sacrifice the meaning at the expense of the English structure. We have also tense or wa, for example. So wa in Arabic is another syntactic void that exists in the English language, something that cannot be transferred or replicated from Arabic to the English language. So while in Arabic, for instance, it is allowed to use wa and multiple times in the list, in the English language, we don't tend to use this. And if you see, for instance, a sentence using wa 3 or 4 times, you would deem it unnatural, and you would say that this must be a mistake. And still, for some translators, in order to, say, convey the same meaning or to maybe replicate the stylistic feature from the Quran, to the English language. They tend to keep it as it is, even though it is unacceptable in English language. And so sometimes, as I said, they try to sacrifice certain structures at the expense of the meaning, and sometimes they do the exact opposites. We have an example of tense shift, which is another huge problem that translators actually face when trying to, render the meanings of the Quran. There is a very interesting case, which is the use of kana, for instance. So kana in Arabic has a very special use in the Quran, and the only use, you will find that this use only exists within the Quran and not outside the Quran. So normally kana is translated as was, but there are some cases in the Holy Quran where kana is actually used to denote something in the future. So kana can actually be used to talk about something in the future. And when you look at translations, different translations, and how they actually approached the translation or the rendition of this, say, kana, you will find that they translated will. So they use the future instead of the past. And of course, this stylistic element here is definitely lost. And this is, as I said, one of the syntactic voids that can't be actually closed or bridged, no matter how competent and skillful the translator is. So even though I would say that the translator is a bilingual person, someone who has a mastery of both the Arabic language and the English language, someone who is also bicultural, not just bilingual. So bicultural meaning here that the translator is well aware of both the source language and the target language. The Arabic language and the English language. So even if the translator is bicultural and bilingual, this does not mean that these cultural voids, these syntactic voids and semantic voids can actually be successfully and effectively filled. So here again, we come back to the saying of Abdul Hussein Abdul Rauf, who says that no matter how competent or skillful the translator is, they will never be able to imitate the language of the Quran. I have here brought some examples to see how they were actually translated or approached by different translators. وهو الذي ينزل الغيث من بعد ما قنطوا وينشر رحمته هو الولي الحميد. And it is who sends down the rain after they have despaired and spreads his mercy, and he is the wali. As you can see, the wali here was not actually translated because the translator believes that this word does not exist in English and it should be transliterated as opposed to translated. And they explain the word as helper, supporter, protector, Lord, worthy of all praise. So what I wanted to focus here is not actually the word wali, but the word ghaith. And here I have another word which is normally viewed to be synonymous with the word ghaith, which is al-matar. So فَجَعَلْنَا عَلَيْهَا سَافِلَهَا وَأَمْطَرْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ حِجَارَةً مِّن سِجِّيلٍ. And we turned the towns of Sodom in Palestine upside down and rained down on them stones of baked clay. These terms normally would look at this on the surface to be synonymous, but they are not synonymous. And each one was used actually in a particular context to convey certain meaning that was not on the other. But as you can see in the translation, they were translated the same way. So even though they are different, they mean totally different things. They might have, for instance, the same conceptual meaning al-matar, but their connotational meaning or connotative meaning is totally different. And the translator may not be aware of that. And especially given that there are a number of translators, I would say all translators have actually failed to convey that specific meaning of, the difference between these two words. So ghaith, for instance, is used in English, in the Quran, to, it has, I would say, positive connotations, something that is good. And when compared to matar, rain, which is used or which has negative connotations. So this positive, negative connotations is definitely lost in translation. And so the translators could not either intentionally or intentionally convey that meaning. So maybe they are aware of them and they could not find a word maybe to use it instead of rain, or it might have been actually done unintentionally. But what they should have done is actually use explanatory notes in this case. Just try to contextualize the reader, to explain to the reader that this word is not the same as the other word, and that this one is used in this context and the other one is used in that context. Another example would be al-ajdath wal-qubur, which some people might say they are synonymous. And even translators, if you look at a number of translators, for instance, Hilali and Khan's translation, Arbery's translation, we have Abdul Halim's translation, Asad's translation, you will all see that they treated these two words synonymously. And so they translated them as if they were the same words. But again, the Quran does not say use a word unless it is strategically relevant to the specific context. So وَنُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ فَإِذَا هُمْ مِنَ الْأَجْدَاثِ إِلَىٰ رَبِّهِمْ يَنْسِلُونَ, and the trumpet will be blown, the second blowing, and behold, from the graves they will come out quickly to their Lord. And the other one, وَأَنَّ السَّاعَةَ آتِيَةٌ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهَا وَأَنَّ اللَّهَ يَبْعَثُ مَنْ فِي الْقُبُورِ, and that they may know that the hour is coming, no doubt about it, and that Allah will resurrect those in the graves. As you can see, the word graves was used to translate or to refer to the same words. So qubur and ajdath, which are of course used differently in the Quran. Each word has its own meaning in the Quran, but still they were translated the same way. Again, I can say that maybe the translator was aware of the word and they did not know, or they did not have any other word, English word, that can actually convey the same meaning, or maybe they were unaware of these differences between the two words. Again, there are, I say, hundreds of instances within the Quran where the translator is unaware of certain polysemous words that seem to be that have maybe different meanings, and also synonymous words that seem at superficially they seem very synonymous, but again, connotatively they are totally different. Having finished the first part about the importance or why do we need Quranic translation, the fact that 80% of the Muslim population is non-Arabic speaking, okay, and therefore translation is actually needed in order for these people to understand and to say engage in their faith, especially when it comes to prayers. So it is not allowed for anyone in the world to perform prayers except in the Arabic language. But this does not mean that they should not, for instance, understand what the Quran is, especially when they don't understand the Quran, they don't understand the Quran, and they don't understand Arabic, and they don't speak it. And here, as I said, translation is something that is self-evident, although, as I said, there are some scholars who oppose the translation. So for the development of artificial intelligence, which has, of course, greatly changed the way we think about and use machine translation. So AI power tools like neural machine translation have made translations faster and more accurate for many types of texts. However, research shows that translations created by humans with the help of MT helps tools are still better than translations done by machines alone. So machine translations works best when the text is simple, repetitive, and uses everyday language, and it struggles with more complex content such as literary or highly specialized text, as noted by Melby. So I talked before about the different issues presented by the Quran. These issues, as I said, included semantic issues, morphological issues, also syntactic issues or cultural issues within the Quran, and how there will always be some voice that can't be actually bridged. And here comes the role of AI, artificial intelligence. So the idea here is that can machine learning based tools like ChatGPT, for instance, or Claude or Perplexity AI, can they be helpful? Can they be of any use as to to bridge these different voids? And as I said, my research article was actually based on or focused specifically on ChatGPT. So MT before and after the rise of AI. So machine translation before and after the rise of AI. If we go back in time, 10 or 15 or even 30 years ago, we will find that we had some MT models that were very traditional, very basic. We start, for instance, with the rule-based machine translation model or framework, which was based on rules. It relied on predefined linguistic rules and extensive bilingual dictionaries. And of course, it required human experts to encode grammar, syntax, and semantics into the system. And translation quality depended heavily on the quality of rules and dictionaries. And one of the problems with these, or with this framework, was I'd say the limited adaptability and the fact that it struggled with idiomatic expressions and contextual cues. So the focus here was just on rules instead of contextual cues that were totally overlooked. And if we, for example, give these traditional, I would say, frameworks something like an idiom or a metaphor, they would definitely not be able to translate it accurately and adequately. And the same for other models that are statistically based. We have also the ones that are example-based machine translation. So, for instance, if we take the example-based machine translation, which is usually based on giving examples. So, what I do is just I give, say, thousands and thousands of examples of translations, language A and language B, and then when we try, for example, to translate a sentence, for example, I am happy into French or into Arabic, it just looks at whether this specific sentence has already been in the system. And it is in the system, it will give you, say, a good translation. If not, the translation will not be, possible. We also have the hybrid machine translation, which is a kind of framework that has, incorporated all other traditional models or frameworks. And so it included rule-based machine translation. It also included statistical machine translation and example-based machine translation. And of course, the reason why they have came up with this new hybrid machine translation framework is the fact that they wanted to make the best of the benefits that were part of the traditional models. So each different model has, say, some benefits and some drawbacks. And so they try to at least make the best of these benefits and try to incorporate them into the new models. But the best or the latest models that is now widespread in the world is the NMT model, so the neural machine translation. So I'm going to give you an illustration of how these different models work, especially the rule-based machine translation model, which was the most widespread one, as I said, 20 or 25 years ago, and the model that we now use that is AI-based, which is the neural machine translation model. So this is the a graph showing the rule-based machine translation model, which is a method of translating languages using a set of predefined linguistic rules and dictionaries. And it relies on grammar rules for both the source and the target languages, along with a bilingual dictionary that matches words or phrases from one language to another. And so the system analyzes the structure of the sentence in the source language, then applies the rules to transform it into the target language. For example, an RBMT system translating I am happy from English to French would do the following. So I am happy would try to find the equivalent of the word I, which is je, then which is suis in French, and then happy, which is heureux in French. And then it will try to apply the rules of, say, French to that specific sentence. And it will give us the sentence should be happy. But as I said, if the sentence or if the text is very simple, very repetitive, it means that it has been trained on it, it has been used before, then the translation is going to be, say, effective or successful. But if the translation or if the sentence, say, is metaphorical, for instance, or idiomatic in nature, then the sentence or the translation would be unnatural, as it's going to be, or it's going to give you a literal translation of that sentence, and it will not convey, the meaning of the source language. For the NMT, the neural machine translation, which is actually based on the concept of deep learning, where a neural network with multiple layers processes the input data. And for translation, this involves training the network on a large corpus of bilingual text, so it can learn to predict the probability of a sequence of words in the target language, given a sequence of words in the source language. So the architecture of an NMT system, neural machine translation system, typically involves an encoder and decoder framework. And so the encoder processes the input sentence and compresses the information into a context vector, which represents the semantic meaning of the sentence. So the decoder then uses this vector to generate a translated sentence in the target language. And so the entire process is end-to-end, meaning that the system learns to map input sequences to output sequences directly without the need for intermediate steps or handcrafted rules. So while the previous models, even the rule-based model or the statistic model or the example-based model or the, say, the phrase-based model, all relied on hand-crafted rules, meaning we have a person and the person is doing actually all the work, even though it's machine translation, but I would say 80 or 70% of the work is actually done by human being. As opposed to the NMT model, the neural machine translation model, here we have the system working with probabilities. And so you just, say, feed the system or feed the model with thousands and thousands and thousands of data sets from the two languages that we are working with, either, for example, Arabic, English, French, or English, German. And then the system works by itself. And also, as opposed to the other models, the system is more sophisticated, more effective, and it takes into account, the contextual cues, the context itself, and it can translate any text so easily without any problems. But again, there are some concerns when it comes to the difficulty or the sophistication of the text in question. For instance, translating simple text is not the same as translating Quranic text or religious text, or maybe legal text, where the terminology of these types of texts is totally different. But again, if we say train a specific model, train a specific machine translation model to translate a specific type of text or genre, then of course this model is going to succeed, because we are focusing on one specific type of text, as opposed to having a model that can actually translate any type of text, any genre of text. And that's, of course, very, very different, and it will take a lot of resources. So coming back to the research article that I have published recently. So one of the purposes or one of the objectives of the research was actually to see the extent to which a machine learning-based tool, which is ChatGPT, is able to translate the Holy Quran. Of course, I did not work on the Holy Quran as a whole because it is empirically impossible, but I have taken it upon myself to choose or to work on Al-Fatiha chapter. And as you can see, I have worked on some translators, because it is impossible to work on all translators. So I have chosen 5 translators. And the reason why I have chosen these translators is that they represent, of course, different timelines, different chronological times, and each translator has their own, let's say, approach to the translation of the Holy Quran. Again, I used Al-Fatiha chapter with an interpretation of the chapter itself. And so you cannot use the chapter by itself without giving ChatGPT, for instance, a context for the chapter, for the surah. And so I use Al-Qurtubi interpretation, Tafsir Al-Qurtubi, in order to help ChatGPT with, the contextual, to give it a contextual understanding of the whole surah. Then I can measure the adequacy and the accuracy of its translation of Al-Fatiha chapter. So for the sampling procedures and data collection instruments, as you can see on the slide, I have used these 5 translations. So Abdullah Yusuf Ali, we have Thomas Irvin, and we have Muhammad Bigtall, we have Muhammad Taqiyuddin Al-Hilali and Mohsin Khan, and lastly we have Muhammad Abdul Halim. So before I have given ChatGPT the Quranic text, the Surah Al-Fatiha, to translate it, I have actually asked it whether it can actually translate. And you should not, for instance, just give ChatGPT Surah in Arabic and then ask it to translate it, because what it's going to do is that just going to give you some translation that has already been performed by a translator. And so what you want to do is that you ask ChatGPT not to give you any translation that has already been performed. And so you make sure that the ChatGPT is going to give you its own translation or translated version of Al-Fatiha chapter. So when Al-Fatiha chapter was translated, I need, of course, to measure the accuracy and adequacy of the translation. And for that, I use 2 machine learning-based metrics. The first one is BLUE, and the second one is Meteor. So the BLUE stands for bilingual language under study, and then we have Meteor, which stands for a metric for evaluation of translation with explicit ordering. So what is interesting about these metrics is that they provide quantitative, objective measures of translation quality. They also enable comparison of machine translations to human reference translations. And they also measure precision by comparing machine translations to reference translations. And lastly, the last information that should be, given here is that the higher the score, the better the result. So if, for instance, BLUE or Meteor have, for instance, 1, it means that the translation was actually perfect, and it totally matches that of the reference translations. If it is, for instance, closer to 0, it means that the translations were bad, they were not accurate, they were not adequate, and they are unacceptable translations. And of course, the way these metrics work is by comparing, I would say, the reference translation to the candidate translation. And so we cannot really say these metrics are actually machine learning based metrics. I mean that they are always, or they only can be used to evaluate the translation of a machine, not of a human being. And so what you do is that you compare a machine translation, okay, text, with that of a human, a human translation. Okay. So it should be noted that there are some differences, of course, between the metrics I have used. I have, tried to use the first one, which is BLUE, which is less sophisticated, less complex than Meteor. And so from BLUE, it's usually used to compare the source translation or the reference translation to the candidate translation. And it just matches words. For instance, I have Surah Al-Fatiha. If the words in the translation, the reference translation, for instance, the translation of Arvin, or the translation of I say Hilali and Khan, is the same as the one given by ChatGPT. If the wording is the same, then blue scores are going to be the blue score is going to be high, even if the translation is actually bad. So it just matches the words. If the words are similar, the more similar are the words, the more or the higher the score will be. And this is, of course, different from Meteor scores. So for Meteor, it is, as I said, a more sophisticated metric, as it considers synonyms, stimens, word order, and it also provides a comprehensive assessment of fluency and naturalness. So while I say blue is accuracy-based, Meteor is also is accuracy-based and also adequacy-based and nature-based, meaning it measures whether the translation was actually natural and fluent and also accurate. And so to evaluate machine translation, as I said, I used machine tools like PyMeteor and Natural Language Toolkit. So the PyMeteor package calculates Meteor scores, which checks how similar the machine translation is to a reference by considering word matches, synonyms, and word order. So Natural Language Toolkit is used to calculate blue scores, which measure how much of the machine translation matches the reference text exactly. And so before using these tools, we break the text into smaller parts called tokens, like words or phrases. And this tokenization process is essential because both Blue and Meteor work by comparing these small units between the translations. So the comparison does not involve sentences or phrases or I say clauses, but it includes only words. That's why I needed to tokenize all the chapter in order to make it easy for this measurement, this evaluation to take place. I have also talked about the evaluation process. So as I said, each reference translation compared independently to ChatGPT's output. So what I did is that I calculated Meteor score and Blue scores of each translation and compared to the ChatGPT score. So comparing ChatGPT's translation to that of Arvin, again, it's going to give me a Meteor score and a Blue score. And the same process was repeated 5 times. And at the end, I had 5 scores of Meteor and 5 scores of Blue. And then, of course, I calculated the average score, both for Meteor and Blue. As a reminder, again, as I said, the highest score would be 1. So if the closer the score is to 1, the higher or the more accurate, the more adequate the translation is, and the closer it is to 0, the less adequate, the less accurate the translation is. So this is the example of the translation given by ChatGPT. On the surface, it might seem that it is an acceptable translation, which to some extent is, but upon closer examination, one might say that this is obviously ChatGPT's translation and not a human translation. And you might, for instance, realize some of the wording that is ChatGPT, which is that realm, for example. So the Lord of all realms. And this one, I say, exposes ChatGPT's translation because people who use ChatGPT a lot would actually, recognize the structure and the type of vocabulary used by this machine-based tool. So for the findings of the evaluation, the comparison of ChatGPT's translation and that of the 5 reference translations, you can see, as you can see, we have the highest score is close to 0.8, which is close to 1. As I said, if it is closer to 1, it means that the translation is accurate and fluent or adequate. Of course, when I say fluent, I mean the Meteor score, and when I say accurate, I mean the Blue score. So for the Blue, for the Meteor score, as you can see, we have 0.7, 8, and then for the blue, the highest blue score would be 0.7 as well. Okay, so and this high score was that of Erwin, meaning that ChatGPT's translation was similar to that of Erwin. It does not mean that the wording is similar. It just means that some of the words used by ChatGPT were also used in an Erwin, and that's how, or that's why the score was actually high. The lowest translation, as you can see, is that of Abdullah Yusuf Ali. So the mature score was 0.5, or yes, I would say 0.5, and then for the blue score it was 0.3. And the reason why Abdullah Yusuf Ali's score was the lowest is his use of archaic language. So the language used by the language used by ChatGPT is normal English, everyday English, even though it is, of course, liturgical in its nature. I mean that we can see that it is not like the language we use every day, but still it is not as similar as to that of Yusuf Ali's. So for Yusuf Ali, he uses, as I said, a lot of instances of archaic language. That's why it made his score, both the meteor and the blue score, very low. I have here some examples for you of two different verses from the Holy Quran, especially verses that are metaphorical in nature. And when it comes to translating some metaphorical verses within the Quran. When I say use this, it does not mean that it failed completely, but sometimes it gives, say, some acceptable translations, and other times it gives some very bad, unacceptable translations that are very different from those of a human translation. So an example would be here, وَالصُّبْحُ إِذَا تَنَفَّسَ, by the morning as it breathes, and the dawn as it breathes away the darkness, and by the dawn as it brightens. Here I have included ChatGPT's translation within these three, so as to make it hard for you actually to recognize its translation. So you can give it a try and see whether you can actually recognize the human translations and the ChatGPT's translation. Again, I have an example here, وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ, and out of kindness lower to them the wing of humility, and lower to them the wing of humility, and lower into them the wing of submission and humility through mercy. So for the first one, the translation of ChatGPT is actually the first one. So by the morning as it breathes. As you can see, the second and the third one look somehow similar. And for ChatGPT, it used the morning instead of the dawn that was used by the two translators, Hilali and Khan and Arbery. And then we have here وَخْفِضْ لَهُمَا جَنَاحَ الذُّلِّ. The ChatGPT translation was actually the second one, and lower to them the wing of humility. So one thing that ChatGPT does not actually do is use explanatory notes between brackets. And so most or a lot of translators try to minimize, as I said, the syntactic and rhetorical void that exists between the Arabic and the English language by explaining certain say expressions between brackets. For instance, if we take the word tayammum, or the word siyam, or the word I'd say kafir or kufr, okay? These translators might actually translate them, but they know that their translation is not actually sufficient. And so what they do is that they try to explain these translations in the form of a footnote, trying to explain the meaning of these words, because they know that non-Arabic readers are going to misunderstand them. They are going to misinterpret them. That's why they try to make sure that they are understood in the right way. So one of the limitations of the study, of course, is that, as I said, just as a reminder of the findings of the research, is that the ChatGPT was actually, or did moderate translation. The score was 0.8 for the Meteor and 0.6 for the Blue score, which means that it was not very bad, given the data I have fed to ChatGPT. And when we talk about machine learning based tools in general, or training machine translation models in general, we might need thousands and thousands of data sets. And what I did was just give ChatGPT 5 translations. I did not give it 10 or 20 or 50 translations. So had I given ChatGPT, say, 50 or 70 translations, the scores, I am 100% sure, would have been different. And so the more data sets, the more data we fed to these tools, I say the more efficient, the more effective they will be. And imagine having, for instance, a machine learning based or machine translation based tool like ChatGPT, or another framework maybe, that is aimed only at the translation of the Quran. Imagine that. So if this, or if such a model exists, it means that the training process took, I would say, years and years to complete, especially when we need to give, as I said, millions maybe of data to train this model to translate the Holy Quran more effectively. And so this, instead of giving ChatGPT, for instance, 5 translations, we might give it, for instance, all the English translations out there. We might also give it all the interpretations out there, so that it can understand every, I say, subtlety of the Quran. Therefore, the extent to which it will succeed in rendering the Holy Quran would be different, as opposed to just giving it 1 or 2 or 3 translations. So while ChatGPT, as I said, succeeded somehow, or giving it its own autonomy to translate or to do the translation by itself is not, or is a very bad idea. As I mentioned at the very beginning, if we are to make sure that these tools are used more effectively, they need to be complemented by a human intervention. So human interventions or human translators might actually do the translation, and they might also be aided or helped by these tools in order to make their translations more effective, more acceptable. That's it for my presentation. I hope you benefited from it, and if you have any questions concerning this presentation, I am more than happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ismail Dahia, for this insightful, rational lecture. We greatly enjoyed the entire presentation. The lecture began by acknowledging the significance and complexity of translating the Holy Quran. The process, the translation may face, the translator might encounter difficulties that are originated from the structure or from the cultural context that the Quranic language presents. Translators should take into consideration challenges that require careful considerations. Mr. Dahia explored the emergence of artificial intelligence in the field of translation, particularly focusing on the on machine learning tools and using machines to translate texts written in Arabic. A significant part of the discussion centered around ChatGPT and its potential role in producing English translations of the Quranic text. The lecture evaluated ChatGPT's translations, especially of Surah Al-Fatiha, comparing its performance with 5 human-produced translations. He also emphasized the importance of incorporating insights from Al-Qurtubi and others, or Al-Qurtubi's tafsir, to enrich the analysis of the linguistic and cultural dimensions of the text, and to facilitate the translation provided by ChatGPT. As if he was teaching the machine how to use tools in order to translate the Arabic tests. While ChatGPT shows promise, Mr. Dahia identified areas of improvement. He provided ideas that can reinforce the notion of artificial intelligence, and he recommended several changes or several modifications in the prompts that the researcher or the translator should provide the machine in order to provide a reliable and valid translation. At the end, he discussed ethical and theological considerations that arise while using artificial intelligence. He highlighted the need for sensitivity and respect of the structure, the cultural context, and the richness of the Arabic text or the Quranic language. Several followers presented some questions. Let's start by the first one, which was written by Fatima Folki. She said that she wonders, she says, how can artificial intelligence translate Quranic expressions such as قوله تعالى وهن العظم مني واشتعل الرأس شيبا. This is the first question. She has another question, which is, how can an integrative model be formed that ensures the benefits of artificial intelligence while preserving Quranic values in translation? I think this question you have answered it during the presentation. The third question that she introduced is, can ChatGPT translation preserve the rhetoric patterns of the Quran? You can answer the questions, or I can add some other questions.
Yes, so the first question, how can AI translate Quranic expressions such as قوله تعالى وهن العظم مني واشتعل الرأس شيبا? Okay. Normally ChatGPT would actually translate it literally. The translation would be literal, unless you contextualize it. You give it, as I said, you provide it with some interpretations, some tafsirs, such as maybe Ibn Kathir, and how the meaning, the different layers of meaning presented in this specific verse. By doing so, the ChatGPT will actually be able to translate it, at least approximate the meaning of such verse. Again, the reason why I provided ChatGPT with a number of translations is that I wanted it to learn how it can actually translate. And the number of translations I provided was very, very, very low. So the more translations, the more data you feed ChatGPT, the more efficient and reliable it would be in translating such terms. Again, these metaphorical expressions or idiomatic expressions are very hard for ChatGPT or any other machine learning-based tool to translate. When you have a simple, simple text, maybe normal everyday speech, you will not recognize whether it was actually translated or not, or it was translated by ChatGPT or not. But the more I say sophisticated, the more difficult the text is, especially legal text or religious text. It will be obvious that the language used there is that of ChatGPT and not of a human. I hope I answered. For the other questions, I think I have already tackled them in my presentation.
We have another question from Mr. Mohammed Jafar. He says, to what extent can artificial intelligence translation be trusted?
So to what extent can AI translation be trusted? And of course, you're not going to rely on AI translation 100%. So there will always be a need of human intervention, as I said. So we will have generally 3 different types of translations. That of a human being alone, which is going to be better to some extent than that of, say, an AI-based MT. Then we will have a translation that is performed only by AI, and then we have this complementary translation where ChatGPT or other tools are used to help the translator, the human translator, in their process of rendering one text from the source to the target language. And there will always, as I said, there will need to be a human intervention in order to evaluate or measure that specific translation. So in my case, for example, in order to avoid subjectivity in the evaluation of ChatGPT's translation, I used metric, AI metrics. So these metrics are objective, and they provide quantitative data that can be used to evaluate the naturalness and the acceptability of certain translations, as I did in the presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Ismail. In your opinion, what ethical considerations should be taken into account when using artificial intelligence for translating sacred texts like Quran?
So the ethical considerations. So if you are aware, recently there was an AI integration in WhatsApp Meta, if you remember, if you are aware of that. And some people realize that it can, if you ask it, for example, about the Quran in general, to provide certain verses from the Quran, it gives you wrong verses.
Indeed.
And they, I heard, I am not 100% sure, but I heard that they retracted, that specific feature of the AI. It means if you ask it about something that is sensitive, like that, like for instance, the Quran or other sensitive texts, it will not actually answer you. And I think this is one of the reasons. It answers actually your question, because they know that it is very, it's a sensitive topic. And so we cannot actually put our whole trust on AI to do this job for us, especially when it comes to, say, religious purposes, like translating the Holy Quran.
Yeah, indeed. Artificial intelligence tools or power tools provide sometimes wrong explanations and wrong translations of text written in Arabic.
Yes.
They may sometimes you feel that there is a kind of hallucinations. The machine provides you with information that does not exist within any real text. Let's return back to your article. What specific linguistic and cultural challenges did you encounter while evaluating ChatGPT's translation of Quranic text?
So, for example, we have the word realms, as you can see. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, Rabbul Alameen. So, Al-Alameen was actually translated by realms with ChatGPT. So, if you look in the dictionary, for example, you'll find that the realm does not actually convey the meaning we have in the interpretation, for example, of Al-Qurtubi, which is totally different from that given by ChatGPT. Okay, and for the linguistic, I say the linguistic problems, I did not actually find specific linguistic problems, especially when you see that there were some aspects which were better than human translation. And so, for instance, the use of emphasis, the most merciful. So you would say, you would find, for example, Bismillahi ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, one translator would render it as the merciful, but ChatGPT would render it as the most merciful. So giving more emphasis than that of the human translator. And so in some aspects, the ChatGPT's translation was better than the human translation. And in other aspects, especially the cultural ones, it did really bad. Okay, as I said, if you ask it, for example, to translate some very, cultural terms, okay, cultural references, or maybe metaphorical or idiomatic expressions found in the Quran, it will always give you the wrong translation.
Yeah, indeed. So currently we cannot talk about the machine replacing the humans. There is always a need for human being to control and to guide the machine in order to provide.
That's true, but there is something else that we need to pay attention to, which has to do with the fact that when we talk about AI in general, AI models, we need training. So we train these models. And so when we train, we don't train them with, I'd say, very small amount of data. So normally we need millions and millions of data in order to make sure that this model works as it is supposed to work. And so the problem, again, when we have a model or maybe a tool that has many purposes. So normally ChatGPT is not used only for translation. It is, part of generative AI. It generates text in general. And so one of the purposes of AI is to translate. But imagine if we have one AI tool specifically tailored to translation, but not just translation, specifically tailored to Quranic translation. And I think the results are going to be totally different because we have, I say, invested our efforts in coming up with a model that is specifically aimed at translating to Quran. And so, of course, I would say how it's going to translate is going to be different. Okay, so there will be more, I'd say, how can I say that? So the quality would be very high. That's what I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Dahia, for this insightful and valuable information that you shared with us today. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to you and to the followers and who are following us now in the YouTube and providing us with their questions and interact with us. On behalf of all attendees, I would like to express our heartfelt appreciation for this rational lecture. Any final words, Mr. Dahia?
So my final words would be addressed to you, okay, and to the members of the linguistics research and language planning team at Benaissa International Academy for giving me the opportunity to present my lecture and my research finding with you and with the audience. And thank you so much again for your support and for your help.
You're welcome. You're always welcome to be with us here in Benaissa. Thank you, Mr. Dahia. Thank you all for joining us today for this insightful presentation, and special thanks to our distinguished speaker, Mr. Ismail Dahia, for sharing his expertise and valuable insights on this complex and vital topic. your contribution have certainly enriched our understanding and raised questions. What I like in these lectures is that the researchers get resources or get several ideas to start thinking of other questions and to do research on different topics. I would like also to extend my gratitude to everyone involved in organizing this event, especially the academy leaders and our technical team for their support. To our audience, your engagement and thoughtful questions have made this session even meaningful. I still see that there are interactions, there are other questions, but we don't have really the time to deal with all these questions and these discussions in the chat. So we encourage you to continue the conversation and explore the themes and discuss the themes that were discussed today. Don't forget to subscribe for updates on future events. Thank you once again, and we look forward to seeing you at our next session that will be special. The topic of the next lecture that will be peeling the research onion, unveiling the layers of effective research design. That will be delivered by special guest Professor Benaissa from College University. Thank you, Mr. Ismail Dahia, again, and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.